Hello, everyone. Welcome in the next umbraCoffee episode. It's been a while since we were here, but the time flies, and we are. I was speaking with some team members before we went live today that, despite of the fact that it's not weekly, it's monthly, it's still the same surprise at the end of the week.
I know. And here's the thing. Before, Marcin and I would go, oh dear, like on a Thursday, it's umbraCoffee, we need to sort something. And now we like a week out, which I'm like, oh, it's umbraCoffee coming up, and we need to sort something, and still it gets to the Thursday before, and we sort something.
Yeah, but fortunately enough, we are all here. We have all the guests that were planned to join us as well. Who are, of course, Kevin, Jam, and Jacob. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Well, yeah, good.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
You're probably two of the busiest people in the Umbraco team. Yeah, just two of us. There's a few more.
There's quite a few more, I think. Yeah.
Full steam ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were, of course, talking with Callum and with some other people from the Umbraco community about various topics since the last time when we catch up with Richard Sotomon here on umbraCoffee. And still, despite, of course, I don't know if it's a surprise or not surprise, but there's one topic that everyone is mentioning whenever we talked about Umbraco. If anyone can guess the topic, it's probably,
I don't know what that will be.
It's one of the numbers, and it's the number in between of 13 and 15 in this case, and of course it's Umbraco 14. And we can definitely talk about it today as well, and from various perspectives, I think, because we obviously have you, Jacob, from the HQ and from the core perspective, and Kevin, you were busy, and you probably still will be busy a little bit with aligning everything with what you have in your suite of packages and work.
And arguably the earliest adopter of every Umbraco release, but especially this one, you've been playing.
I tried not to be as well. I really did, but I couldn't resist.
So maybe let's start from you, Jacob, and the kind of information from the sources. How the process went, is going. What is the current status of Umbraco 14, and are you still busy, or you're relaxed and awaiting the magic button to just be pushed to release it?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, up until I think the first beta, I was. And we released 3 betas, and during that there was so much stress for me and my team, and then once the last beta hit and it was kind of release candidate from there on, everything kind of calmed down a bit. There's only one way forward, and we will release May 30th, and that's how it's going to be. But I think, all the way like a year ago, before we did the first preview releases, it was sort of everything was up in the air, and it was kind of calm. But then we had Code Garden last year, and people were already excited then. And I remember running into you, Kevin, at the airport, and I think you kind of you released a blog post afterwards saying you kind of nerd sniped me into doing localization. But I think I also kind of nerd sniped you from there on into getting on board and kind of becoming that early adopter, and that really helped us as well to transition into where we are now, to move towards the finish line. And I don't know how much to say about the product as such at this stage. Obviously, there's going to be changes. There are a lot of things we had to migrate, a lot of things we came across and thought, well, that's not really built that well in the old back office. And, do we want to spend the time migrating that one-to-one? Because that's kind of what the estimate we had was. A migration wasn't a reinvention of anything, but some things just weren't really up to standards that we wished for, and we kind of had to put that on the back burner and then say, okay, maybe we'll get to it in this, in the release candidate phase. Maybe it'll be a 0.1 or 0.2 or something like that. We'll see about that. So I think we hit as long as you can build a website with the back office, it's a CMS, right? But if you like certain features, either they're coming and they'll be in an improved state, or they'll be replaced with something else, and we'll see about that.
We have Vishal in the chat here asking about block list. Is block list? I know there was some issues with block list. I wasn't aware that it wasn't available, but I know there's a few things that are missing still.
Well, you can create a block list and a block grid for that matter, but I know there are issues with it. They are the last two sort of property editors that are missing, and they are the most advanced, of course, the most complex property editors. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I know there's been found a lot of bugs on them as well, and what we thought was done. I believe block list is more or less done and in a working state. Block grid, on the other hand, is still lacking a little bit. And of course, the newer feature of having blocks in the rich text editor is something that we still have to build. But we'll get there before the release.
I think to summarize it, of course, we are in the release candidate state still from this perspective, and we've been discussing before we went live that there were 2 release candidates already, right?
Yes.
So the differences between them 2 are not a big ones, but of course it's still time to report feedback and test out things and capture everything what is or what is not working, as you mentioned already. So yeah, it is this blog post that we will of course link in the description is still a nice source of the information that were introduced in the release candidate, with all the changes, of course, from the perspective of the build architecture, with some good buys and highs to various technologies and frameworks being in use. So yeah, it is an active process, and you've mentioned the date is May 30th, right? That's the end of the May.
Yes.
So yeah, it's exciting.
And it's also important to remember the UI project here is just half of the project. The other half is the management API, and that's taking at least the same amount of time to adapt to as migrating the whole UI. I mean, we're basically ripped out all of the back office controllers and replaced them with something else, more silo-based, more REST API, and had to come up with a lot of ways to solve that, because you're moving from view models into data models, and then kind of letting the client be in charge of what to do with that data and how to combine the data. And that's actually taking a lot of time and way more than expected as well. So it's there are 2 projects in one here, and then also going from Newtonsoft JSON into system text JSON has actually proved kind of difficult, because you kind of work with the JSON and have a lot lying around, and that might not be in the perfect state. And now you're kind of moving into a strict library that doesn't have any soft fails, right? It's
exactly. When we've done those migrations, the soft fails is exactly the thing. It's like behaviorally and API wise, they're almost identical, Newtonsoft and system text. In fact, James Newton King is behind both of the libraries.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't fail. It doesn't fail gracefully anymore, where before it would just, you could give you a null or something. Now it all blows up. And things like converters just don't quite work the same, which has been a challenge we found as well. Because we've been dealing with that pain in projects for a little while, I'm hoping the back office journey for us is going to be easier for our packages and things. But yeah, we'll see. We've been bitten by that. I feel the pain.
Yeah. Speaking about the journey, then maybe Kevin onto you, because first of all, when we discussed, and some people already asked if there's a Usync version 14 released already, or where it is, because I think you are a kind of Marcus Brownlee of Umbraco, because you operate on the products for 2 months before they are released. And I think this is how you approach that. So how is the journey looking from your perspective? Because obviously you were involved.
Yeah, so there is a Usync for release candidates 1 and 2. So we did that yesterday, the core. We've been building on it since the betas, essentially. I held off, and one of the reasons I talked to Jacob in the airport was that I was saying I wouldn't do anything until localization was in, because I just didn't want to have to redo it, because I got stung quite a bit doing version 8. We did version 8 and then ended up having to rewrite it loads when we did it with the betas. So I didn't want to do that again. But in the end, it's sort of, given the timescales, you can't really hang around too much, because I mean, it's only 30 odd days now till release. So we've had to work on the betas and the release candidates as we go. So it's a steep learning curve at the beginning. It really is, moving from the Angular world to the TypeScript lit world. But once you're over that, it's actually really nice to work with. It's just a question now for us. It's finding where things are, because obviously the documentation is being written as the product's being developed, and so there's a slight lag. So if you don't know where something is, a lot of source code searching, it's basically where I'm at the moment. So Usync is actually, from a front end point of view, a really simple product. It's a dashboard, so it does everything in the back, and we've had to rewrite the API to user management API style. So there's a Usync management API endpoint essentially, but the dashboard is essentially all we've had to do, and still not super easy, but it's not like a complicated product that integrates with all bits of Umbraco. So that's fairly done now, I'd say. Usync sitting there, we're sort of watching the release candidates, and as they come along, making sure we can do what's in the release candidate. So Jacob saying some of the block list stuff, there's a couple of other property editors that will blow up if they're set up a certain way. Lots of Newtonsoft is now system text. We've got Usync does a lot of that, so making sure we're streaming the JSON right. But the product is fine, itself is fine. I'm working on Usync Complete, which is much more involved, and it's got fingers everywhere, and that's, going, hopefully will be done by the end of this month, by end of May too. But it's a lot more work. And so I'm just fiddling and searching documentation. I wrote those loads of blog posts that people might have seen, was basically my discovery phase. So I sat down for a week or two and just went, how do I do the things I need to do? And I wrote them down. And everyone's saying, they're great, that they're really just my brain dump. So they're not necessarily the easiest things to follow, but they are just, this is how I create this, is how you create a menu item, this is how you create a section. Because I was just in my own head.
If you click on Kevin's profile here, Marcin, at the top.
Yes. You can, I know. That's the whole series, which has...
Yeah, so there's loads of posts, but they're mainly brain dumps, but it was just, that was me going through it. So I don't even know how long ago that was now. It was March.
Yeah.
So that's when I did that. And since then, I've just been doing products. That's why I've sort of gone quiet on that stuff, because I'm now trying to implement things.
I recall from the start, you were basically looking at the features that you need and use, and just without trying to build Usync or anything.
Yeah, just
going into CMS and saying, can I build a hello world or a
essentially, because I thought it's better than that. I didn't want to do it because I've done this before. You start on your main project and then you just end up rewriting it. You get a week in and realize you've done it wrong, and then just have to go all the way. So I was trying not to do that.
I was going to say, I guess, TypeScript and whatever was fairly alien to you and coming from the Angular world and those APIs. But I guess now you've been doing it a couple of months. It's sort of, I hope it's clicked.
Flipping back's actually gone. I can do it, but flipping back's where my brain melts. So I've got to support on something Angular.
So you are fully converted to TypeScript.
Not quite, but definitely not enough angle brackets, curly brackets everywhere. I miss them and just all over the place. But no, it's much nicer to work with as a platform and just as a thing, finding things. It's just like knowing where they've moved, and obviously concepts have changed. And to be honest, probably initially when I did all of them, some of it's the Umbraco way of doing it, which is fine, but sometimes it's overcomplicated when you want something simple. So there's context repository stores and the other one, sources. You don't need all of them all the time. If you build in certain bits, you do, but I probably overcomplicated and I've scaled back a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say that this was the full DDD in case of discovery-driven development, because not only you were adopting the new ways of doing things, but at the same time Umbraco was.
And it fed back as well. So some of the stuff from those posts, I know Jacob fixed things, so the auth and all of that. I think me working that out is what led Jacob to change the way that we do that now. So it's simpler for other people. So it's sort of looping back. It's still doing that even now, I think.
Yeah, and Jacob, from your perspective, are you guys fully converted to TypeScript evangelists now? How it's looking back and backporting some of this functionality?
Yeah, I've worked with it for close to a decade now, so
it's
sort of was there already. It was actually doing AngularJS, not with TypeScript, was a hard trial. But
something I've been doing in the last week is. I've had to build my first package or the first customization for the CMS for 13 in a long time. I've not done a customization for a while. And so I was like, okay, it makes sense to use the UUI components, because at least conceptually then when we map that over to 14, we can reuse these things. That's been quite a learning curve too. I mean, it's great in the sense that I was able to get a UI together really quickly, but then all of the spec for it is all still TypeScript. Not that matters, but I'm not working in TypeScript. And so I've had issues where I've passed something in and the shape doesn't match exactly what it's expecting on the other side, and it just, well, nothing happens. And you're like, oh, why is this the case? And yeah, that's kind of that weird world. And also where, well, in Angular we have reactivity, like data binding, and we don't have that in any of the new stuff. So I'm doing weird things in Angular to make that work, and I'm like, realistically, I should now be doing it the proper way, which is through the events and bubbling stuff up and whatever. So I'm trying to learn bits about the new back office and new UI, I guess, in a sort of familiar setting, and ending up with this weird hybrid of and clash of concepts. At some point, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and go, 14 is where we build stuff now. But
I'm not convinced by the UI in 13, to be honest. I did it a couple of times, and I'm like, I think it's, and I just do packages, so I'm always doing customization. It's not like I have to come back to them, but I'm not convinced I would gain anything from using the UI in the 13 stuff I've got.
No, and
because of all of the jumping through the hoops you have to do.
Same conclusion we reach. Yeah. And there's in most cases there is an Angular component that does the same thing.
Yeah,
and works kind of as you'd expect it to. But it was an interesting learning experience, let's put it that way. So at some point I will go all in on the full TypeScript and whatever else. But just getting my head around a few little concepts at a time at the minute.
Yeah.
I took the approach of kind of being a little bit backwards when it comes to adopting the new stuff. And I think that whenever I talked with a lot of the people, they said, we wait for v14, and then we can probably build an extended CMS. So I'm pretty curious if we'll see a huge spike of the back office customizations after the version 14 being released, because right now I do at least feel that a lot of agencies, people, and developers holds back when it comes to the customizations in the back office because of the uncertainties of this transition period between the versions. So do you guys already approach the phase of migrating things from version 13? Of course, you do this because you effectively are working on the new product. But from your perspective, Jacob, is there any plan of supporting package creators or back office extensions to be migrated over without let's say a huge ton of refactoring, or how we can think about supporting people of doing that?
I think there are multiple facets to that question, because UI wise, I mean, if you could use UI library already in the old back office, I should say, and to be honest, it wasn't, ever going to work that great with AngularJS. It's just too different, right? AngularJS works with attributes. You do the ng click, you do the ng model. We don't have that on web components, right? And they are hard to map between each other. And we don't even have to talk about two-way binding, right? It's just not there. And AngularJS was just magic in that way. So in a way, we aligned the UI in a way that many of the components are sort of called the same. You have your, it's a UI button instead of a UMB button, right? But that can more or less be translated directly, making it easier-ish to migrate. But then you have the whole backend as well. So if your extensions, your packages rely on a lot of backend, that's probably also, you're going to face the same challenges that we did with the two projects in one, where you have to come up with new controllers because it's now an open API spec, and you kind of have to work a little bit with that, use attributes more than extend from the Umbraco JSON controller, and you get your head around that. And the service layer has been changed a little bit as well. There was a lot of logic in the controllers, in the old back office controllers. They've been moved back into the service layer, so you might experience more, well, I'm not going to call it issues, but maybe more complexities working with the services, because they now expect you to actually follow the schema of stuff. And I believe maybe one of the bigger ones will be notifications. So like the sending content notification, where you could change the content model. You can't do that anymore. It's just a data API, so it doesn't control the UI, how the UI processes the content anymore. It's not a view model, so you kind of have to do that in a client. And for you to do that, you need to build more extension points for the client, and that's going to be the biggest hurdle, and that's not possible just to auto migrate for us. So to answer your question directly, some of it we can do, and you'll have to come up with new ways of doing stuff, but hopefully for the better as well. It'll be more performant, and it'll be more easier to read, and it'll work with the extension API rather than across the extension API, rather than hacking the back office. So you'll have to follow the standards, so to say. Then comes the next obstacle, where we probably don't have the standards set for everything yet, and we're eager to learn what you need so we can build that into the core and actually support it, like more extension points or more filters or more, everything.
Yeah, I would. We've done a couple of other things we've done because migrated like small packages is. If the best prep you can do is to try and get any logic out of your own controllers that you've got going, because you're going to have to redo those controllers for the new API. And if you can move your logic out of your controllers at the back office, your back office migration won't be too bad. And if you haven't separating out your package into two things, so there's a client library and there's a backend library, that makes the migration a bit easier, because you can essentially, in theory, have a big shared bit that'll work on 13 and 14. Because once you're beyond the management API, obviously there's some JSON stuff. You can sort of have a shared library, and then you're just replacing your front end layer, sort of. So we did the maintenance manager package, which is really noddy and just puts a page up and has got a dashboard. But in doing that, we separated it off so that there's an API layer that is the new management API and the new client. And in theory, the old client works off the same core library in the middle. And when you're just migrating dashboards or things that aren't necessarily doing loads of, or sort of providing supplementary information to Umbraco, it's your own code. That's not a terrible migration. I'd say at the moment, personally, it's like it takes like a week to get your head around TypeScript, web components, how Umbraco works. And then it takes like a day to do the actual migration of a package that's a simple-ish package. So if you've got something like that, or not a package or even custom code, and you're looking at migration, I think it's going to take you a week to get your head around how Umbraco 14 works. But after that, it might only take a day to convert a dashboard and its backend API to a version 14 dashboard and a backend API. But you've got to have done that first week to get it in your head. I think it's the current hurdle I'd say most people have probably got. And so when we're at this release Canada phase and things sort of work, sort of don't work, I think unless you've got an imperative to build a package at the moment, that's probably why people aren't. And so you can see all the activity is essentially the commercial package developers at the moment. It's me, and it's obviously the Umbraco team, and I think Richard's doing CMS import. You can see that's what's happening, because unless you've got the time and the imperative to do it at the moment, you're not going to do it until 14's out. And then when you've got clients, you'll need the packages and you'll write them.
Completely. I mean, I've got one UI heavy package, which is MegaNav, and has a very tight Angular dependency. Yeah, which is fine, because actually it was quite a lot of hassle to even get that working in Umbraco of old as well. In theory, you could still pull that dependency and could still use that. It doesn't really feel in the spirit of all modern JavaScript and being as vanilla as possible or decoupled from a framework as possible. But until we have a need for that, we're probably not going to even attempt looking at it genuinely, because it's a lot of work. And like you say, it's been a moving target a bit still up until this point. And there's a lot of other skills. I think we'll brush our skills off on doing things like custom dashboards and small, simple property editors for end users that never get released anywhere first, and then.
But at the same time, it forces us a little bit to think more about not just doing things one way, but thinking about architecture of the systems. And what you've mentioned, Kevin, about this API first kind of approach. If we were talking about Umbraco back office being a client of itself APIs since the transition period, right? So this is the more modern approach of doing things. And if you have this API layer, the client layer, however we'll name it, then the building client UI is just a client UI. So that would hopefully, and unfortunately for us all, build a little bit more of an orchestrated way of then easily rebuilding the UIs in case of any future uncertainties of the framework or UIs or whatever else, and building the client up for. I do remember times when there was a mobile application to manage the content on Umbraco CMS, and building something like that with the APIs in place, open APIs with the standards and the ways to go shouldn't be a big task itself, because all the logic is there. So it's more about orchestrating it the right way, and then of course adopting. But a week for a dev to familiarize with TypeScript, as you've mentioned, should be a good starting point. And we'll definitely see more of the packages when the version will be released, because a lot of people want to build that. Right now we have a lot of knowledge. That's what we can say, because also that's kind of what we wanted to highlight from the perspective of the early adoption. Matt Braceford, you, Kevin, and Marcus from his perspective, they shared, all of them, they shared a lot of the useful information about their journeys and approaches to adopting or using, Warren as well. So there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of documentation already, and discovery-driven development is still the way to go for a lot of the cases. But it's a month from now when the first solid and official release will be there, and there is no way back, as you've mentioned, Jacob, right? So that, like, this is the way to go, and can be then done better on, right?
What I've been enjoying is, I think it was Matt's blog. I guess Matt and Marcus's posts here, which is, Matt had one for simplifying imports of TypeScript. Like, that's cool, but this is ultimately nothing to do with Umbraco, and it's purely just about enhancing, improving his workflow now. So we're starting to see people benefiting, let's say, from TypeScript and exploring beyond just here's how you do something in Umbraco. The same with Marcus's post that we had there about actually doing testing of components. Again, it's not something that Umbraco necessarily is going to be telling people to focus on, but it's a great thing as a way of
front-end testing. Who would have imagined? But to be fair, you could do a lot of this stuff in the old back office, as you say. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from working with TypeScript there. I know there's been a few community efforts even to make typings for the AngularJS controllers that we ship in the back office, but in lieu of that, and that's never really been something we supported, it's perfectly all right for you to use TypeScript, use Vite. I mean, you don't have to use lit. It works fine with AngularJS as well, because you kind of have to think in your build step and whatever you're developing. And then another note on what you were saying, we did the Umbraco collab where we tried to convert the Google Maps package, and it's been a few iterations now. And I think we kind of wanted to show how quickly you move from this is back office logic into this is just regular JavaScript logic. I mean, from when we started showing the map and then had to, actually the first issue we stumbled into was that we couldn't figure out their documentation and their events.
Google Maps, which is a horrible API in the first place. And that's nothing to do with the back office. So we quickly moved on from that. And it was like, okay, so we can save a property. That's really all it takes. Now we have to show a map instead, and that's something entirely different. It's got nothing to do with the back office. And I think that kind of shows how fast or how embedded we were before with the old backers. And this was all Umbraco, and like, did Umbraco have lazy loading of JavaScript? Did Umbraco have, asset handling? Did Umbraco have minification and all of that stuff? And that was kind of, we supported everything. And in doing so, we also kind of shot ourselves in the foot there, because we couldn't remove any of it. We couldn't optimize. We couldn't really do anything. And now it's split, it's separated. We do our thing, you do yours. And actually, we even removed the dependency on Smidge now. Because we bundle everything, in the client, so to say, and optimize there. And you should do the same with your packages, or not. And that's up to you, really.
Nice. So what are the next steps then, Kevin? How you are approaching it? You said we talked about a timelines a little bit. What are your plans?
When a release candidate comes out, you see if everything still works. That's day one. So that takes a day. Essentially, the way I'm aiming for Usync on day 0, Usync complete on day 0, translation manager n days afterwards, because I'm not even going to start it until
have you so you've not even started looking?
No, I'm Usync is first. We have a thing which I think I've said before, is that what we see is actually people want Usync from day zero, because obviously you want to build a site. Translations is closer to release. So we often see a lag anyway when a new version comes out of just even by people buying licenses. It's like 3 months later. So we've got a bit of time. So we know that. So I'm not focusing on it. Also, it's bigger. Translation Manager, smaller product that people use, but much more complicated than Usync or Usync Complete. So just waiting until it's all out, and hopefully a bit. We won't run into any issues that we're running into now and sort of waiting for them to be fixed. So that's the thing with Usync. It's like, it does this, but I know certain things don't work, so we can't confirm it works because there are things in the code that don't quite work. So
I think Lottie the other day said that like Usync of all packages, it's like you can, if there's a property editor that you commonly use that isn't available, it's like, okay, we'll just find an alternative or use something at the core, or do without it for now. Whereas Usync is so imperative to so many people's workflows that it's like we'd have to change the way we work without this product. So kudos to you for getting that out on day zero.
Well, the other thing we're trying to work out is how a migration will work, because obviously 13 hasn't got grids or nested content in it. I mean, 14 hasn't. 13's got them legacy. 14 things have gone now, so they're actually not there. So how you get from 13 to 14 is obviously there's Usync migrations, but we think data types have changed as well in a very subtle way. So hopefully a 13 site that's running all new properties will be just a single import into 14 with Usync, but things that are running grid and doc types will need migrations. And so whether we build that into Usync, I don't know if I've got the time, to be honest, because we've only got like 20 days. But
I was going to ask about Usync migrations, because
it'll do it, but the perfect world is I want it to be a button. So there's already something in there. If you put a v9 Usync folder into a 14 site now with Usync on and run it, it'll pop up a box saying, do you know you've got a version 9 thing? Because it should be a version 14. I wanted that to be you press a button and it says, I'll migrate it for you. But that's basically taking a big chunk of Usync migrations and put it in Usync, which is doable, but in 20 odd days, it's maybe not doable. So that's where we're at.
And a whole can of worms potentially as well. So
and we've said this with migrations, and I get emails and I always say to them, we don't support it because migrations are horrible. And it's only there because Lee made me write it. So Lee Kelleher, nerd sniped me. And so I say to people, it's there, but we can't support your migrations because it just that would be all we would do. So.
Yeah. I must say that I'm still impressed, and of course I chased you also for a couple of the challenges myself, because I was getting my hands on the migrations. I was trying and hacking this all over, and there is a lot of already code that handles a lot of scenarios that are probably not the default ones that our users are doing, but that's still the way of having a translation language in between of Umbraco data types, document types, and everything is extremely hard to maintain. And that's exactly why this is so well adopted, because I don't know if there's any developer who knows how to work without any kind of these translations, either if it's using or Umbraco deploy or anything what is doing this kind of effective migration between environments.
Look, Martin, there are very much still people out there who just make each change on each environment.
They'll have to be. Usync is only used by 25% of websites, and then I don't think deploy takes the other 75%, so there's a gap.
No.
Really?
Someone doing that,
Please, if we have viewers now and we have some of them, please raise your hand if you have never used Usync or Umbraco deploy or any kind of automated mechanism between. And it's not about a bad thing. It's more about really, because I know that we were doing this like that. I do remember still times when we had 3 tabs open, one with the content section, one with settings sections, third with the developer section.
I've witnessed somebody that I've worked with use Redgate SQL compare to deploy schema changes.
That's why we put the little messages when you do a Usync. We worked it out. It was based on, if I sat here with the 2 screens open and typed it, it would take me a minute, 20 seconds to do a property. So they add that time up and give you a little message saying, you've just saved 3 hours. Why don't you go and have a cup of tea? And
Yeah, but that's true. You just reminded me, Callum, about some of the good old memories as well. But yeah, that's interesting. But of course, we are still living to the fullest with the existing versions, and at the same time, when you are guys busy with the new things, a lot of people are still migrating from v7, v8, or I even spoke with someone a couple of weeks ago who was actively maintaining version 6. website. So there is various things in the way, and still Umbraco is evolving on every aspect, I would say, of the releases, because we have also new release to discuss just in a second, which is version 13 updated version. So it is an active days, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add for this version 14 journeys? Is there anything how our viewers can help you other than reporting issues?
So RC2 came out, was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
I think my main actual thing, just on a non-development thing, is the release candidates naming. I know they're called release candidates, but I don't, and I've gone on record, don't think they're technically release candidates, as in there are things in them that don't work, so they're not candidates for release.
Yes.
And I am a little worried, just in a non-development interview, about the marketing of 14 and the adoption of what will be a complete replacement of the back office.
You're opening a very big topic here, Kevin.
I am, and I could go on for an hour, but ultimately, my thing is that I was thinking about this morning, is that 13 is the long-term support release, 14 is a short-term interim release, but it's a big change. In the world of Umbraco, there isn't much that tells you that 13 is the long-term support release and really, really you should go for it. And 14 is an interim and it really isn't the one that is recommended for most people. Yeah. I was looking at the Ubuntu stuff when they're the famous people for long-term support versus short-term support. Now, they released the long-term support yesterday, so it's sort of hard to prove. But when you go to the Ubuntu website, they throw the long-term support release at you and the interim releases are not encouraged. And they say 95% of people run long-term.
I was going to say we had this exact conversation at the London meetup the other day, and it is the case.
It's not true in Umbraco.
Node.js have a recommended version, an LTS version, and a latest version, which is like in this case it could even be, and I don't want to wish ill on the new back office, but it could be that there just isn't a critical enough mass of packages in the coming couple of releases that means that it doesn't make sense if you are building a site from scratch to go with 14. We had this conversation that for a first timer coming to Umbraco, the thing that we love and know about Umbraco right now is that you've got all these plugins. It's amazing. You can just get up and running really quickly. If someone's first experience was 14 in those early days where there isn't that wealth, you're like, well, what is this? Why am I here? I don't get it. So from a marketing perspective, absolutely, there probably should be if you're getting started right now, we recommend you go with 13, or I hate to say, even say 10 if there's packages that don't work on 13, because 10 still.
Well, at the very least, it should be the long-term support, because not only it's the length of time at which it's a valid choice. Yeah. And it's just like, if you don't see that, and it partly, to be honest, because Umbraco doesn't market which version you should download. They tell you to use cloud. But if we get to which version you should download, it should really be saying most people, it's definitely 13, at least for the next few years. Because if you install 14 and you go through the first 3 months of learning all the new stuff about 14, you're 3 months away from it being replaced. So it's like, it's hardly worth it. Yeah. There are cases for using these new ones. It's not like, obviously no one wants to say don't use a new version, but people, you see it in the forums already, and especially on Discord, which I know you're not on, Callum. They will, there's people saying, I'm trying to build a site in 14. It's like, I don't think it's that ready yet. You're just going to cause yourself a world of pain. And if you're not super experienced in Umbraco stuff, 13 will get you a site really quick. 14 is going to just,
we look at Umbraco 8, there was still people building 7 sites because 7 was old, trusted, reliable, had working packages, etc. Till about 8.6, which took a bit of around a year, a little bit over a year. Which again, I know a lot of work's been put into the new back office, and I think it will be a lot quicker than that this becomes stable and and widely adopted. But you're right, Kevin. Like who's going out day one and building a site on the latest release? I
mean, by the time we get to 17, which is the next long term, which is only a year and a half away, that will be the new back office, and that will be solid because it will have gone through 4 releases. But if you've got a critical client, you really want to be on 13 until that day. Yeah. But I just think at the moment, it's not a developer thing at all. It's a marketing thing. If you go to Umbraco, you will naturally go, I'll just download the latest version. Yeah. But there's nothing telling you that the latest version isn't the rock solid, we will support it for the next 3 years version.
And feature-wise, let's say from a marketing, a blog post announcing the release, what features are there for an end customer to convince them that this is the platform to choose. It's a developer technology overhaul. So for us, it's great. We've got all these extension points. We can do all these fantastic things, but I'm not going to sell that to a client because that immediately isn't going to give them all this new value. It will in the longer term because AngularJS is deprecated and whatever else. We need to be on the LTS, but yeah. It's interesting you're saying this, Kevin. All these conversations happen at the London meeting.
I'm sure they have happened. Could go on for another couple of hours, but we'll stop there.
No, but that just to wrap it up, I think this is a little bit developers thing because we have a tendency of being the early adopters, download everything what is the latest, and then either blame it or feel joy of using something what is the edge technology. And I think in this case we need to be very clear and communicate it well that this is the new version, but it doesn't mean that this is full feature complete and the same developers experience with version 14 as with version 14. And if it will be clearly communicated, I think that everything will be all right. But the problem which I've seen at least the most is like someone will download the latest version as it was with version 8 and so on, and build something, and then it's easy to say that it's not working, right? When in reality, if you would use the previous version, it would work. And so that's up to communication, and I think we need to just do the best what we can do to make people aware of that, either new people coming to the community or old people who are just wanting to change something, right? So that's, I do agree with that. And we will see how it will go. We'll be observing it from the inside and outside, but yeah.
So all your, concerns are of course valid here, and I think we have had tons of discussions around this externally as well as internally. I think, if I had to attach a few comments to what you're saying is that we also have to remember we live in kind of a bubble of wanting to customize Umbraco here and there. And there are like 700,000 websites running Umbraco. And for the most part, if you build a website, you're going to want a few packages, maybe, if you know. But you can, in fact, build a website without packages. And that'll be fine for a lot of use cases. So if you look at what you'll have in 14.0 is, in fact, what we would call a production-ready CMS. All the commercial packages will be ready for the final release. And you can sort of start out on it. But we have been saying, and I'm going to touch upon the STS versus LTS in a minute, but we have been saying that you should choose LTS if it's a one and done website. You're never going to touch it again for a few years. Hard sell clients, whatever. And if you intend to stay in active development on a website, you should go with the STS and then, follow the version upgrades. So there's at least a rule of thumb around that. And then I do believe we have had some very successful STS releases. Meanwhile, since V10, where we sort of started on this endeavor of release cadence with 2 majors every year, and they have been small-ish. They have been easy to migrate, at least from what we've heard, and people have, sort of built up trust that they could do that, moving from 9 to 10 until 13 now, and now is 14 is coming, and where we do intend to that you can migrate your data. Of course, your extensions will have to change, your back office will have to change, and that's a bigger release. And boy, am I happy it's not happening in 13 as we originally intended, where we had to ship an LTS from the same. I'm of course sad we had to postpone, and just a year ago we really thought we could do it in 13, and I think it's for the better we pushed it a little bit, and now onto the long STS range. So as you say, 14 will enter its support phase in November because it will be replaced by 15, and that will be replaced by 16 already next spring. Like in a year from now, we'll be talking about version 16, and that'll then lead up to 17, which of course I can understand many would consider that to be the actual release of the new back office, if you will. But of course, it will be just a big of a leap going from 13 to 17, as if not bigger than going from 13 to 14, say, because you have to do the same migrations. There will be no sort of easy transition extension-wise from one back office to the other. but hopefully your data will experience an entirely different journey and be much easier. In fact, we didn't. In 14, we're not going to change any of the front end adapters to data. So it's mainly to convert it into. We're doing a few conversions of the data types, right? But anything you have been doing in your property editors should keep working front end wise. So I just want to point that out as well. But of course, totally get
we've been STS to STS advocates for a long time, and we've had to backpedal on that a little bit with clients because some have asked, what about 14? It's like, well, we don't see it as a viable upgrade, day one like we might have before, but it's something we're going to monitor. So if it takes, I don't know, 6 months for us to get the packages that we need there, then it's 6 months before adopting, I guess 15 at that point, and then we'll go back to those STS things. I'm very conscious we've sold, as Mark has said in the chat, we've sold too many clients too many big sweeping upgrade changes that we can't keep doing that. So we want to mitigate as much as possible the risk of this new back office upgrade. And at the point we feel that that's safe enough to do, we're just going to do it, because otherwise we end up, with V10 sites that need to go V10 to 17. That's going to be a nightmare, like a rewrite, basically. So yeah,
and we saw it before with first V7, right, was a pretty big change. V8, and not really going to go into that now. It was unfortunate, the first release. I wasn't there. V9, of course, changed the entire backend. That was a big thing as well. And how could you even start to convince your clients that you were migrating from .NET Framework to .NET Core, and what was even that? And you might be able to convince them by performance metrics or something like that. But to be honest, it did take people a long time to migrate to that. And I know from my consultancy days that we didn't even want to migrate, from V8 to V9 because we couldn't sell it to clients. But new websites, of course, could be started on V9. And I think we're going to see similar things here with 13 versus 14. Now we're not changing, the language, so to say, or the framework, but we are changing both the backend and front end, sort of, but at least the backend for front end is changing, and that is going to be a tough migration. But hopefully, you will be able to build new websites without hiccups from the start. And there's definitely a lot to learn. It's steep learning curve, but it is working, and we are hearing from people who want to start new websites on 14. And well, back to the rule of thumb, if you intend to stick with it and keep updating it, then I don't see why not.
Yeah, I mean, this is another kind of worms the version number things, isn't it? Because I think the version number, which is a commercial decision more than anything, does sort of lead to the confusion, because there's nothing technically. There was no technical reasons, great ones, why 11 and 12 were called 11 and 12, because 11 and 12 didn't have features that fundamentally broke 10. They could have been allowed 10.5 and 10.8 or something as releases, whereas 13 to 14 is a proper change. So people could have been just upgrading the current. You just upgrade 11 to 12 is nice and easy, but there's no fundamental changes. If you actually look at it, the breaking changes in 12 and 11 are not SEMVer breaking changes.
No.
They could have been minor releases.
Yeah.
And so it's all about how you talk about it and think about it, and what exactly is a major change. And because that's the release cadence that Umbraco come out with, everyone's like, oh, you have to upgrade to the latest version, you have to upgrade to the latest version. But in reality, 10 to 12 were minor upgrades.
Yeah.
And it was doable.
The discussion back in the day, it was good. It was in the V8 days, wasn't it? When the chat was happening, like, what are we going to do about versioning? What are we going to change? And I remember at the time, there was a big thing of, we want to stop talking about versions. And I guess it's exactly what Mark's pointing at. Get away from that perception that there's big jumps. Are we going to see, like, corporate-esque, we've got Umbraco Q1 24, Umbraco Q2 24 releases, but in some ways, actually, the semantic versioning under the hood doesn't really matter. They can version them however they want. From a marketing perspective and from a client perspective, they just need to know what's improved, what's changed.
Yeah, the problem is people jump on versions, don't they? And that's what they worry about, the versions. And you go, the next version is this. Yeah. And it just means that, I mean, I know, and what Philip's saying is true about the major dependencies. It was because the Umbraco team, I remember talking to people, felt trapped by the versions. So version 8, you couldn't, there was an awful lot of legacy that couldn't be upgraded because it'd been version 8 for so long. But the problem is that without any marketing from Umbraco about what version means what and what actual recommended versions there are, people just see the number and assume that the latest number is the best one to go to. And with the best will in the world, Jacob, obviously there's a lot of work on into 14, but 13 is battle-tested CMS. Lots of people, it's based on 9, 10, 11, 12. It's based on years of the .NET Core framework underneath it and that front end, and we know it works, rock solid. 14 will work on day one, but it hasn't been tested in the field in the same way. So if you were an agency,
a site that goes out within 3 months, then it's probably not the choice.
It's a risk to take, and obviously it depends on your business needs. It's not saying don't do it at all, but fundamentally saying that 14 is like, oh, you should just go to 14 because it'll be ready is like, it's a risk. It's got to be acknowledged, I think. Otherwise people will go to it, and it's a reputational danger, isn't it?
It seemed that everyone in the chat sort of kind of agreeing with everyone here, I think. Like, yeah, 13 is great and it's good, and 14,
pros and cons.
14 is exciting. Yeah, it really depends.
It depends.
I think 13. I keep saying it's the best CMS we ever released.
Such an Apple headline yet. Best iPhone we've ever made.
Yeah, and point 3 came out last week. It's great. I mean, it's battle tested. But it's like having an old car, it leaks a bit of oil. You have to fill it up once in a while, right? And the quirks, and you can sort of go around them with Usync or other packages. And I think we are trapped as well a bit there, and we wanted to get rid of it. And it's important to remember major versions also allow us to update our dependencies to other major versions. 10 to 11 saw a tiny MC bumping 2 major versions. It was already outdated in 10. And so we were able to upgrade that to TinyMC v6, the newest, in v11, and actually be able to test that in an STS to prelude what we're now doing in big scale in 14. But we'll see more of that coming, and of course, new editors introduced as well, and more improvements.
The thing that I've had a lot of conversations recently about hackathons and the value of hackathons, and again, this is a whole can of worms I don't really want to get into too much, but I always come back to the sort of pre-festival hackathons that would happen at UK Fest, where we would have literally, this was in the V7 days, 100 people in a room and 100 tickets would get moved across the board in that day, and there was sort of an idea of focus on something small and do that. As time's gone on, there's fewer bugs, or that there's still bugs, but there's the product's way better managed and it's more stable, which is awesome. So there's less to do on the bugs thing. And then there was also this activity that happened at hackathons of people making like cool new things. So one example would be something like nested content going into core was initiated at hackathons or retreats. The content blueprints feature came out of those sort of innovative hacking away on an idea things. And I've argued that the CMS now is far less open and receptive to that sort of contribution because you have a roadmap, you're executing on it. But we've been stuck in this, the mantra's been everything should start life as a package, but we've been in this weird place where the extension points don't quite exist to be able to do that, and making that package becomes a massive hack and really, really difficult. So I feel like with 14, we are now entering that era where we can genuinely have people hack on an idea because the extension points are there and are documented, and sort of surfaces some of the possibility that the back office actually enables people to build with. So I feel like that's quite an exciting time. So we've almost had a bit of a lull for, I would say, 3 to 4 years on the package front. Nothing that innovative coming out, like a lot of maintenance, a lot of upgrading, understandably. But I feel like this is the turning point for the more innovative, more creative ideas.
There are packages I haven't done because they're not worth doing on 13 because 14 is coming out, or they're not worth doing on .NET 8 because .NET Core was coming out.
Yeah.
So I'll have to just off my list of ideas.
Yeah.
When I've got spare time in about 2 years' time.
Then the public board and the hackathon to address these ideas. But yeah, I think again, smaller major might be better than bigger major in the various cases. Planning wise, it's a lot of easier to be planned, and that's understandable from various perspectives. I think it's all about aligning and then making sure that the communication is clear for both sides, because then we can all kind of adopt basically. And then it's still, the new version still needs to be new for a while, right? So it's like nothing.
Well, it needs to launch first of all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For people to actually work with it, and that's also why we're launching it. We want the feedback from people actually battle testing it, and then making it even more stable, so that when we eventually release the next major, it'll be even better. And while we're seeing a lot of activity on it on the RCs now, I mean, let's be honest, people won't really test it before it launches in a final version. So we're doing it. We're going ahead with it, and it will lag a few things. There'll be hopefully minor things that most clients won't notice, but yeah, and some things will have to be reimagined. But that's all for the better.
Something like tours isn't coming across right now.
Tours, yeah.
But when was the last time you used tours? Like genuinely, like it's a feature that's there, but like, I don't know. I don't think someone's going to miss it on day one, let's say.
I always wanted to use them.
I've always wanted to, but never have.
Yeah.
And then I spoke with someone the other day who said, well, we actually wanted to build a tour, so it was important for him that we ship that, in the new backups as well.
Right.
And okay, I can see that. But, there are a whole host of issues with that. And especially now introducing Shadow DOM, we have to kind of figure out how to do that. But that's one of the features we were like, we can't migrate this. It's not one-to-one. It's got to be reimagined. We got to figure out, because it was built kind of on top of the old backups, and you had all sorts of.
With all respect to Warren, who I think was the kind of leader behind that, it was hacked together out of Hackathon and in cycle hacks to be, wouldn't this be cool? But never really, let's say, architected as an extension point.
Yeah. As a concept, it's great. It's perfect. I mean, we want to build it. We just wanted to support it in the core, right? What it needs, instead of it having to wait for animations with set timeouts and stuff like that, and wait for network calls. We want to actually support stuff like that. So we're going to build it and build it better than it ever was. But concept-wise, it's the same, right? So people, And then we had an amazing hackathon back in February, in March in Bristol, just before Umbraco Spark. People actually got to test out. That was the first beta just launched the day before, and actually I was sitting on a coach from London to Bristol, releasing that on my hotspot, and so there's a little bit of hacking attitude going on, and people were very receptive to that. I remember talking with one of the developers at True Digital who hosted the hackathon, and about setting up the build setup, and he was used to working with some CSS frameworks and post CSS, and he was asking me, how could you do that? And I just pointed out to him, well, Veed has post CSS built in, and it's got nothing to do with Umbraco again. So if you want to use that, just go ahead. And he went and put it in, and I don't have to worry about CSS anymore, he said, and just could do what he used to do on the front end websites now in the back office. So that was an amazing experience for him and for me as well, to be honest, and to actually see people figure out that this is sort of, it's all new, but you can now do what you're used to do in other places in the back office. That was amazing, just gotta say.
Yeah, I know for sure, seeing people who were, there was two camps at that hackathon. There was the back-end developers trying to get used to all this newfangled front-end, going, oh my goodness, this doesn't make any sense. I don't like it. Give me back the old back office. And then there's the front-end developers who've been sort of forced to work with AngularJS, and knowing that it's like, this is not how I do things anywhere else, to now being able to just translate everything they've been doing, and it just works in the back office. And that's exciting, seeing someone able to prototype something that quickly. Right. I think the grumpy old back-end devs like me will take a little while to convert.
But you had an amazing talk as well last CodeGun.
Yeah, I know, because I needed to learn this somehow. I was just like, okay, let's dive in. Let's have a look.
Yeah, and I think that soothed people's minds a little bit as well. Just hearing from someone like you that, you can transition, you can learn it, or you're could take on maybe a few front-end developers and show them the back office and say, hey, well, we need some UI here. What can you do?
We raised this. Just I know we've been talking a while, so I won't open another can of worms. But we raised this discussion on the last umbraCoffee that perhaps, well, who is this really for? Like, are we trying to attract new front-end developers into the Umbraco ecosystem, or is it really for those front-end developers that are already in the Umbraco ecosystem being able to do more stuff? I feel like. What I said at the time, Umbraco has become a .NET developers CMS. And so our community is mostly .NET developers. In that 7 to 8 to 9 transition, there was some vocal people who've, say, worked with Umbraco since the XSLT days that wouldn't consider themselves a C# developer, now being told, well, we kind of got to do a bit of C# to work with this. And so it feels to me like, yeah, it's not going to be something that the front-end developer off the street could come along and pick up and go, yeah, great, I'll work with it. But if you've got someone that's already working in Umbraco, oh yeah, I saw this the other day.
It is exactly summarizing this thing, because we did it for ourselves. We did it. We made it all too complicated. But I do relate a lot with that, and I think again, I'm maybe we are too back-endy here, but that was a hard adoption and still is, and again, we are leading towards this setups, and I see smiles on faces of front-end developers who are finally using or able to use the modern approaches rather than stick with the old versions of Angular. So if they can smile, we can smile as well, and stand next to it and utilize our skills everywhere where it's needed, right? So.
Yeah. To be fair, I also see smiles on C# developers' faces when they learn about TypeScript. Also by Microsoft, and it feels similar to them, feels familiar, and they can do. Sure. And in many ways, TypeScript is ahead of C# as sort of testing stuff that then goes back into C#. So as a language, it's a
trend I've seen a lot of in, like, say, recent years of people on LinkedIn, for example, calling themselves a C#/TypeScript developer. So.
Who knows what will happen again? We need to adopt, and I think we need to wrap up slowly, because we can open a lot of cans of worms and discuss infinitely with a lot of these areas. But I think it's good discussions, and we need more of this. We need more perspectives for sure, because everyone has their own way of approaching the challenges that appears. But to say it needs to be released, to be discussed, we need to test it out. We need feedback. You need feedback, and everyone needs to just be open and let us all find out new reality when the new back office will be released, and then we can see how it will go then next. And at the end, you've mentioned already, Jacob, coming to the groundwork, there was a new release of Umbraco version 13, not that far away in time. So it's still, for those who didn't update yet, a time to do that. And yeah, it's going to be a month now since the version 14 will be out. So we'll see, and we'll, of course, we have the next umbraCoffee exactly the day after a launch. So we probably will discuss how it went. 3 topics at the end, and then we can wrap up from our side. There was an Umbraco impact report that we wanted to mention. It was released as well in between of our episodes, with all the statistics, all the data, and all the information, again, gathered, summarized, and reported back from the perspective of sustainability, community, open source, AI, everything basically what affects us all. From the perspective of Umbraco, and it has a lot of useful information. So we'll just link it up here, and everyone who haven't seen it yet, please do take a look. Other than that, there was a moderate severity. Do you want to tell more about?
Yeah, it's in Plumber and Workflow. You can, if through one of the back office endpoints, you can hit one of those endpoints and pass in some SQL data that will actually get executed on the server, like some SQL syntax that gets executed on the server. Yeah, just patch. People don't like knowing these things are there. I think I had a good chat with Bjarke recently on the CMS team about how these severity levels are classified, and there's an actual framework they're following. So this feels like it's, and that airs towards them being sort of more highly rated than they possibly are in practicality, because here you need someone that knows exactly what to exploit and whatever. But it's not super widespread. I think.
No.
Patch, it's fine.
Still, there are people who use every possibility to hack websites, right? So that's not a hidden knowledge too much. There was one more really interesting blog post from Ken about this.
Ken is on fire right now. His blog is amazing. He's doing like a weekly or so blogs at the moment, and they've all been excellent. So well done, Ken.
Yeah, packages, libraries for the headless as well. There's a lot of work that Ken is doing. We had a catch-up as well as the final catch-up of Umbraco headless community team because the team was disposed and we closed the activity there. But Ken also shared a lot of his activities and a lot of approaches from his perspective to everything what might be missing or might be released earlier for the CMS itself from the headless perspective. So yeah, big kudos to Ken here for everything what he's sharing right now. And this seems to be a really nice tutorial on how to approach the content editor preview for static websites. That is not the easiest task, I can say, because I've seen the teams working on it and approaching this challenge as well with server-side rendering and so on. So pretty good one. And last but not least, there was a U-profile from this month, and the U-profile of April was Amy, who some of us met on last year's Code Garden, for example. Amy was also a part of the sustainability team. And as for every U-profile, there's a very nice detailed blog post on the whole community activity and contributions and everything what Amy has done and is constantly doing as a part of the community. So we'll link it up. And yeah, we also have a nice picture from the Code Garden from last year there with a box of coffee. So yeah, take a look, connect and follow Amy and other U-profiles that will be released in the next months. And that's all what we have on the agenda from the links perspective. Is there anything else that what you want to add to the discussions today? Any other cans of worms to be opened? No. Let's wait for the next episode.
I guess good luck to you both. It's
exactly.
Busy month, probably more for you, Jacob. But yeah, hopefully, Kevin, you get all of your Usync complete stuff done, and that can be out in time. Excited to see that.
We're just getting started. We want to. Now we have a new platform.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just the beginning. That's true. Yeah, fingers crossed. And as usual, share your journey. Reach out if we can help on gathering more feedback or testers to approach some stuff. And we'll of course keep an eye on all the releases, all the early feeds, and everything else that is flying around to get us onboarded. And yeah, we'll catch up next month in the new reality, new back office reality for some of us, and then we can discuss then not only about cans of worms but everything else Umbraco. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who is watching us live and will rewatch us later. At the end, as proper YouTubers, we ask for subscribers, for likes and for content to be distributed, because if you will find it useful and you will have anyone who might find it useful, please do share and like, subscribe, and do everything else what proper YouTuber watchers are doing. We will do our things and our things best in the next episode, and we'll catch up next month with really cool guests, which are already slowly being aligned. We are very much prepared. We can surprise. We already have a guest for the next month, which didn't happen in the past. But we'll see how it will go. Yeah. Cool. Have a great rest of the day and the weekend ahead of you guys all. And thank you all for watching, and see you soon.
Bye.